Police in Hong Kong say they're confident they have the necessary resources to take on pro democracy protesters. For over 2 months now, demonstrators have gripped the Asian financial hub. Protesters initially took to the streets to oppose an extradition bill with mainland China. Now, while that piece of legislation has been shelved, there have been fears that Beijing could swoop in with force to quell the unrest. For more on this story, we can go across to Hong Kong and speak to Jason Ng, Convener of Progressive Lawyers and the author of Umbrellas in Bloom. Thank you very much for joining us here on France 24. In the last week or so, we've seen protesters shift their focus to the city's main international airport. This did get flights cancelled for 2 days. Was this a good strategy, considering we've seen little or no concessions to come from Beijing?
Well, on one hand, the disruption of international travels, you could argue that have alienated international supporters because, I mean, a lot of their flights got canceled. Even people who might have been sympathetic to the cause may now, sort of question the sanity or the wisdom of some of their strategies. On the other hand, the disruption at the airports got instant news coverage around the world, which was exactly what they were hoping to achieve. Personally, my flight from Bangkok back to Hong Kong was canceled earlier this week, and I didn't, make much of it. I understand that there's a protest going on in Hong Kong, and it's just part of life. I didn't want to become one of those convenience supporters when, things are far away. It's then good and well for me to support, but then the moment it starts to inconvenience myself personally, then I started to wag my fingers at them. So, ultimately, like many people, I put the blame ultimately on the government and on their refusal to respond to the protesters.
Now, in recent days, we've had some protesters who've been apologizing for maybe going too far. Do the protesters, in your opinion, still enjoy the public support?
Well, so far they still have, the support of the majority of the public. I mean, the news of this, young protester who lost an eye to a rubber bullet, images of tear gas being deployed in subway stations, and police working side by side with thugs. All these images are pretty shocking and are still fresh on people's mind. Even people who don't care a lot about politics can feel that our chief executive, the city's leader, is hiding behind the police and using law enforcement to try to solve a political problem. But that being said, public opinion may turn on an instant, and more miscalculations like some of the mistakes that the protesters committed earlier this week when they beat up a Chinese reporter at the airport and when they engaged in fights with innocent travelers, that could very well turn, or tip the balance. And so now the focus is really for the protesters to learn from the past mistakes, keep doing what works for them, and then apologize and learn from things that don't work.
Now, I want to ask you about something that we've seen happening now. Firstly, we've had the Hang Seng that's posted its fourth weekly drop this Friday. We have the richest man in your city, Lee Ka-sing, who's taken out a full-page ad in a variety of papers, advocating love, if you will. Cathay Pacific has just lost its chief executive. This is starting to hurt Hong Kong's businesses. Is Carrie Lam right? Is this going to hit Hong Kong's businesses like a tsunami?
Well, I mean, no one has a crystal ball. It's very hard to isolate the impact on the economy caused by the trade war between the U.S. and the Chinese government versus what's happening, on the ground in Hong Kong. But one thing is certain, that trying to appeal to protesters, citing economic data, citing economic impact on Hong Kong isn't going to work, because one of the reasons why protesters are so angry is because they have not been the beneficiary of economic success in Hong Kong. They have been sort of priced out of the property market. They have not been enjoying any fruit of the economic prosperity. And so trying to talk to them that way is really ineffective.
Now, protesters have been calling for Carrie Lam to go, essentially. If she steps aside, that anger which we see out on the streets, whether it's at the airport and different neighborhoods across the city, it's unlikely to go anywhere, is it?
Well, it's unlikely to completely go away, but it will, I believe, go a long way to at least lowering the temperature at the moment. Right now, everybody's so angry. There's so much anger on the street, and Carrie Lam's stepping down will at least be an incremental success for the protesters.
Okay, Jason, thank you very much for joining us on the program today.